talk about Patsy Hutch while we're on the
Yes.
subject. I'll be brief on this, but last week I did approach Patsy Hutch. He didn't want to speak to me. I expected as much, but I felt, and I'm sure you feel the same way, Mick, that from a journalistic standpoint, Patsy Hutch had to be doorstepped. He had to be approached after Miss Justice Tara Byrne said in the Special Criminal Court effectively that it was possible that he was the person who organised the Regency Hotel shooting. She also went further and said that he was centrally involved in the transfer of the AK-47 rifles on the 9th of March 2016. We know those rifles ended up in the possession of Shane Rowan. He was caught with those guns, and they were identified to be the same Kalashnikov weapons that were used in the shooting. So you have someone now that is walking around the streets of Dublin, a free man, not charged with any criminal offence, who has been named by a court, a high court judge in the Special Criminal Court, as possibly being the person who arranged the most high-profile shooting in the country. And he's not been asked about it. No one's asked him about it. Now, with good reason. I mean, you're not necessarily going to just approach Patsy Hutch on any day of the week. He is a man who knows that his life is still in danger. Despite that, he goes for regular walks around the city centre almost on a daily basis. I'm not saying he does the exact same route every day. I don't know. We're not stalking the man, but he is well known and well seen in the city walking around and about. So I felt it was reasonable to approach him. I didn't think it was reasonable to go and knock on the door in Champions Avenue. If Champions Avenue, if you probably know it, is quite a small cul-de-sac, you know, in fairness, there is a 24-hour Garda post close to that house, and they're keeping watch, and with good reason. But if he comes out and about onto a public street, I think it's perfectly reasonable as a journalist to approach him and ask him, does he want to say anything in relation to the judge's comments? That's what I asked him. I walked across the road and I approached him quite friendly, and I immediately identified myself as a journalist and just said, you know, do you want to respond to what the judge has to say about you? I mean, you have to be quick with these types of things because a person, you don't know what necessarily the reaction is going to be. I mean, guessed that he would probably walk away from me quite quickly, which he did. So I'm a journalist, and I'd like to ask you, would you like to respond to what the judge had to say? And he kind of, I would say, he rolled his eyes at me, kind of. It was initially sort of a deer caught in headlights sort of moment. It kind of like, who the fuck are you? Which I can understand. Once I said journalist, it was a roll of the eyes, and the rest of what I had to say, I don't know whether it registered or whether he even cared. He was already walking on. I didn't continue to follow him. He knows full well why I'm approaching him. He obviously doesn't want to comment. He's not interested in addressing it. So that was it. But I'm surprised that, well, I'm not. I suppose I understand why we haven't approached him before, but when a judge in one of the highest courts in the land is naming you in relation to this major offence, I think we have to approach him. Even if we know he's going to say nothing, I think it was the right thing to do journalistically. I don't know if you agree with me, but I hope you do.
Yeah, I absolutely. We're entitled to ask because our readers and our listeners are entitled to know. And as you say, a judge did make pretty strong comments about him. I want to raise one thing. Strong. I want to raise one aspect about this. When I'm thinking about doing a doorstep, I get nervous. But when I commit and I start doing it, the nerves disappear. So if I had been walking up to Mr. Hutch, I wouldn't be nervous, but I would have been nervous sort of thinking about it and preparing for it. But he did one thing which I find very interesting. He blanked you.
Well, he rolled his eyes to journalists and then just split-second decision to just ignore me and keep walking and blank me.
It reminded me of doorstep I did. God, it's amazing things you remember. Maybe 20 years ago, a guy had been killed, and it was either Collins Avenue or Griffith Avenue in North Dublin. I always get them mixed up, but one of the two of them. And there was a fella I needed to talk to, and I still remember it. And he was coming out of the house. I approached him, said who it was, and he didn't skip a beat. He just walked past me. Completely blanked me. I did not exist. And that really grates with me. See, call me whatever you want to call me. No problem. Don't blank me. He completely blanked. I still remember it now, 20 years later. It's just, I think it's a very effective tool. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I've had it happen to me a few times. Yeah, I don't know whether people are advised to just to do that or not, but I've had it happen more than a few times. Yeah, so it's a look that we're both well used to. Yeah, but I feel the same way. I would rather somebody said to me no comment or fuck off or whatever. But when you are blanked like that, yeah, you do feel a little bit kind of no, like I mean, I say something, you know.
Yeah,
but
just you don't exist.
I understand why Patsy Hutch is keeping his mouth closed. I mean, look, Patsy Hutch is not charged with any criminal offence, but a judge has accused him of being centrally involved in a major, if not the biggest, most well-known gangland hit in the country. And it remains to be seen whether anything will be done in relation to that. We know the Garda investigation is open. It'll be interesting to see, because obviously the evidence of Jonathan Dowdall, I don't think they can ever rely upon that again. So what evidence do they have against Patsy Hutch if they're ever going to mount any case against Patsy Hutch? There's questions to be answered there.